The air in the kitchen always smelled faintly of burnt toast, a smell Genevieve knew she'd never forget, because it was the smell of every morning she started before anyone else was awake. That faint, acrid reminder that she'd moved too fast, focused on the next task, forgetting the one right under her nose, a tiny, almost rebellious act of imperfection in a life built on flawless execution. But no one ever noticed the toast. They only noticed that the coffee was hot and the mugs were placed precisely on their coasters, that the school bags were packed, the permission slips signed, and the schedules were mapped out with military precision. They noticed the perfectly starched collar of her blouse, the subtle, calming scent of lavender she wore, and the calm, unwavering tone of her voice as she gently navigated the chaos of everyone else's wake-up routine. They never saw the slight tremor in her hands as she poured the third cup of coffee, the one she needed just to keep the careful architecture of her day from collapsing into dust. That cup was a silent, desperate plea for a few more ounces of endurance. A liquid scaffolding against the weight of the coming hours. Genevieve was the keystone, the central load-bearing element in her family. Her husband Mark and 2 children, Liam and Chloe, in her office, in every social circle she inhabited. She was the planner, the fixer, the listener, the emotional interpreter, the one who remembered birthdays, doctor's appointments, vet visits, project deadlines, and the precise critical moment when someone else's composure was about to shatter. Their expectation of her constant, flawless service was the very foundation of their daily lives, and the silence from them regarding any offer of assistance was deafening, a casual, unquestioning assumption that she was simply the mechanism that kept the world running, leaving them free to focus solely on their own comfort and ease. She held the fragile, intricate pieces of everyone else's lives with a terrifying, meticulous grip, constantly anticipating the next crash, the next emotional leak she would have to plug. But beneath the smooth, polished surface of her competence, the emotional exhaustion was a deep, silent undertow, a cold, powerful current pulling her further and further from the shore of true regenerative rest. It wasn't the exhaustion of a late night or a strenuous run, the kind that a single night's sleep or a hot bath could fix. It was the bone-deep, spirit-weary kind of fatigue that came from constantly filtering the entire world's anxieties, prioritizing others' vast, urgent needs, and completely muting her own internal screaming. The exhaustion of perpetually holding her breath, waiting for the next crisis. Her body was a reservoir nearing structural failure, a beautiful but failing dam designed to protect everyone else from the flood. It was the exhaustion of perpetual empathy, of being the designated container for everyone else's unmanaged chaos and fear. Her mind was a massive, oversubscribed database, meticulously tracking the emotional bandwidth of every person she cared about, calculating exactly how much she could offload onto them, which was always zero. And the profound tragedy of her situation was that she simply could not delegate, not truly, not the tasks that mattered, and the failure to do so was destroying them all, not just her, but them too. She saw the soft, unearned helplessness in her husband's shrug and the passive expectation in her children's eyes, and that dependency was terrifying. But the hard, honest truth she fought every day was that their behavior was a direct consequence of her own. She had created this ecosystem of learned helplessness. She had trained them, not out of malice, but out of the same obsessive need for perfection and speed that defined her every action. She never asked, never assigned, never allowed for the necessary, messy learning curve of collaboration. And so, the burden, the entire immense, suffocating weight remained hers, crippling their ability to manage simple adult tasks and delaying the emotional maturity they all needed. The realization hit her like a silent, catastrophic impact. She had stolen their competency out of a selfish fear of failure. Her hyper-efficiency was their handicap. Her martyrdom was their prison. A truth so painful it eclipsed the sheer exhaustion for a moment, making her feel intensely, violently guilty. But the habit was too deeply ingrained. The path of least resistance for everyone involved was always just Genevieve handling it. The act of handing over a responsibility felt like relinquishing control of a life support system, an open admission of inadequacy. Her internal monologue, a relentless, judgmental voice, insisted that it was undeniably faster to just do it herself, that only she possessed the precise mental schema for perfect execution of the small, vital tasks. The right way to fold the laundry, the correct tone for the client email, the specific comforting words needed for a distressed child. She believed, deep down, that a mistake made by another, however small or correctable, was a catastrophic failure on her own meticulous ledger, a failure she would ultimately have to fix anyway, so she would micromanage silently, absorb the extra labor, choosing to carry the full, crushing weight rather than risk the momentary discomfort of imperfection or the frightening prospect of letting go. This refusal to distribute the burden, this obsessive need for control dressed up as reliable competence, was a cage built entirely of her own effort, a gilded prison from which she could not escape. Every phone call started with the phrase, "Genevieve, I need your help, I don't know what to do." Every email was a new, complex crisis waiting for her stabilizing touch, and she always, without fail, said, "Of course I can handle that, I'll take care of it," never revealing that she was already juggling 5 other near-impossible demands, that her own needs were scribbled on a damp, crumpled napkin at the bottom of her purse, perpetually forgotten until the next time she accidentally caught her own reflection in a shop window, seeing the ghost of the vibrant, frivolous woman she used to be, staring back at her with a look of profound, bewildered pity. The exhaustion manifested in small, almost invisible ways, the subtle facial tic when she was forced to listen to unnecessary drama, the way she sometimes forgot the simplest words like spoon or rain or yesterday, the sudden, irrational urge to smash a perfectly innocent ceramic coffee mug, just to feel something sharp and clean, the relentless, throbbing pain behind her eyes that no amount of ibuprofen or darkness could touch, and worst of all, the complete, terrifying inability to cry. It was as if her tear ducts had dried up from overuse, all the moisture reserved for keeping the atmosphere around her calm and clear. Ensuring everyone around her felt emotionally hydrated, the world saw her as resilient, a towering mountain of strength. They used words like Superwoman, was rock one and saint, oblivious that rocks erode, that even mountains eventually succumb to the relentless cumulative pressure of wind, water, and time. They didn't understand that her strength was an act of constant, internal performance, not a natural state. One Tuesday afternoon, right as the summer heat was becoming oppressive, the mask almost slipped entirely. She was in a high-stakes meeting, presenting a complex, months-long strategy, and a junior colleague, unaware of the tension or the sheer weight of the project, interrupted her with a flippant, dismissive comment that was utterly inconsequential but laced with an unearned arrogance. A tiny, annoying pebble, but it hit the precise cracking point on the massive, invisible dam she'd been building inside her chest, and for a terrifying microsecond, the carefully constructed wall of her professionalism wobbled, her breath hitched, a sudden, blinding white light of panic filled her vision. She didn't yell, she didn't collapse, she didn't cry. She simply paused, a silence so heavy, so absolute, that every person in the brightly lit, air-conditioned room felt it. The silence was the actual sound of a human soul, calculating the sheer impossible effort required to continue breathing, to continue performing, to continue existing as the caretaker. She regained control, finished the presentation flawlessly, her voice smooth and modulated, but inside a new, irreversible fault line had formed, a deep fissure of pure, existential despair that she knew would never heal entirely. That evening she came home, and the house was a deafening symphony of needs. Chloe needed help with quadratic equations, Liam needed a detailed explanation of why his favorite shirt wasn't clean, and Mark, her husband, needed to vent about his stressful day at length, never once noticing the undischarged backpack still sitting by his feet, or the empty dog bowl he'd walked past 3 times, all of them consuming her attention and energy without an ounce of reciprocity. She moved through it all, robotic, efficient, answering questions with programmed patience, but when she finally sat down alone, in the quiet, dim light of her bedroom, she stared at the wall, not thinking, not feeling, not planning, just existing. A shell, a vacant vessel. The exhaustion wasn't merely physical fatigue, it was the complete exhaustion of her soul, the weariness of always being on, of always having to be the stable one, the one who was fine, the one who held it all together for everyone else. She saw the terrible, beautiful absurdity of her life, this overwhelming, beautiful tapestry woven entirely from the threads of everyone else's well-being, and she realized the devastating truth. No one saw the tiredness, because she had become fundamentally defined by her effort. Her exhaustion was invisible because her strength was too bright, too constant. It illuminated everyone else's path, but left her standing completely alone in the deepest, coldest shadow. It took a long, long time. Months of this silent, internal suffocation. But one quiet, rainy Saturday morning, not the one with the burnt toast, but a later one where the rain was a gentle, persistent drumming, she finally found a tiny, desperately needed pocket of courage. Not the loud courage to fight a battle or deliver a reprimand, but the quiet, profound courage to surrender. She didn't immediately fix the jam in the garbage disposal. She didn't immediately answer the demanding group chat message about the weekend plans. She didn't offer a solution to a minor complaint from her partner. Instead, she did the hardest thing she could possibly imagine. She sat down on the floor right where she stood, curled up against the cold wall, and let the first, small, ragged breath of pure, unadulterated, selfish need escape her lungs. It was a sound so quiet that no one in the house heard it. A quiet, necessary admission that the mountain needed rest. The rock needed to dissolve a little, that the keystone was ready to lean. And it was in that vulnerable moment that the solution crystallized. Not to demand, but to distribute. To shift the pattern she herself had forged. The following Monday, she started small, asking Mark to be responsible for the morning coffee and Liam and Chloe for emptying the dishwasher. The initial resistance was palpable, a mix of genuine surprise and subtle, ingrained annoyance. Mark squinted at the coffee machine as if it were a complex alien device and actually muttered, "But you do it so much better," a phrase that in any other context would have swelled her ego but now tasted like ash. Chloe dramatically groaned about the injustice of having to touch wet utensils, executing a theatrical flop onto the sofa, and Liam tried the classic, "I don't know how to do it" tactic, standing utterly motionless, as if incapable of independent movement for a moment. The old easy path of just stepping in and doing it herself screamed at her, a siren call to return to the comfortable inefficiency of her martyrdom. The internal battle was intense, her hands twitching with the urge to take back control, to eliminate the sloppiness and the resistance. But the memory of the floor, the memory of that suffocating white light of exhaustion, was stronger, she insisted, gently but firmly, with a terrible, unfamiliar lump in her throat. "You will learn," she told Liam, handing him the sponge, her voice quiet but carrying the unwavering weight of a final decree. "I'm right here if you need help, but I will not do it for you. This is how we are going to live now together." The first few weeks were messy, chaotic, and frustrating. The coffee was often weak. The dishwasher was emptied incorrectly. Things were forgotten. She had to bite back corrections hundreds of times a day, accepting the weak coffee and the badly folded towels as small sacrifices for her sanity, enduring the collective household discomfort that came with her newfound boundaries. But she forced herself to breathe, to allow for the imperfection, to accept the 80% effort that was still 100% more collaborative than before. And slowly, painstakingly, the shift began. Mark started to take pride in his morning brew, comparing coffee bean brands and even cleaning the coffee maker without being asked. Liam learned to load the bottom rack with military precision, and Chloe, grudgingly at first, accepted responsibility for the dog's evening routine, developing a surprisingly soft relationship with the pet she now felt responsible for. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. There were still forgotten tasks and occasional arguments, but the difference was tectonic. The weight on Genevieve's shoulders began to lessen, not because she was carrying less, but because there were suddenly 3 other hands supporting the load, and in that tiny moment of quiet, defiant surrender, a flicker of genuine hope ignited, a deep, warm, revolutionary realization that holding everything together doesn't mean you have to hold it alone. That true strength isn't measured by how much pain or weight you can carry in secret, but by the quiet, essential, revolutionary act of asking for help, of setting down the crushing weight, even if just for a single necessary moment, and understanding, truly understanding, that the world will not end, it will simply shift, slightly off kilter, but it will keep turning. And for the very first time in what felt like a lifetime, Genevieve felt the possibility of rest, the genuine, healing kind of rest that touched the deepest parts of her spirit, the permission to be human, to be messy, to be imperfect, to be held in return. The emotional exhaustion was still there, a ghost of a shadow, a familiar ache, but it no longer felt like a terminal diagnosis or a life sentence. It felt like a scar, a memory, a quiet teacher telling her that the most important life she had to save, the most important soul she had to nurture was her own. And she knew now that she could. She just had to allow herself to be seen, not for her blinding strength, but for her quiet, beautiful, and utterly exhausted humanity. If you love this story and want to hear more like it, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to us and helps us grow. And hey, while you're at it, let's aim for 50 likes on this video. Help us smash that goal.